A big payday for Andrew Van Ginkel, but what does it mean for the rest of the roster? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Hi, everybody. Sorry there wasn't a show yesterday. I was physically incapable of creating sound with my voice. So I couldn't do a show. You can still kind of hear I'm a little hoarse. I'm a little under the weather, but we press on when we are capable. And yesterday was supposed to be Town Hall Tuesday, where I take your questions, I field your hot takes, and we're still going to do that today. Call it a little Town Hall Wednesday, but some news broke in the meantime. The Vikings extended Andrew Van Ginkel 1 extra year on the deal, but a whopping $23 million, most of which is guaranteed, added to his deal. And the first question in this Town Hall Tuesday mailbag comes from Anonymous, who asks, what's the deal with the Gink extension? If the philosophy is that Turner didn't see the field because he plays the same role as Gink, isn't this a bad sign for Turner? I don't think that that's necessarily the logic that teams go by. I think it is bad for Turner insofar as there will just be fewer snaps to go around, even if he wins them all. But in Brian Flores' defense, everybody's going to play a bunch. So he'll get in, right? And so will Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, and so will Bo Richter or Gabe Murphy if they make the team. Like, everybody will get in to some degree. But yeah, the two Pro Bowlers are just going to be the main guys, which it's, I think, a little weird how quickly we're all like trained to turn that into a bad thing. But Van Ginkel was in a contract here, and he was slated to make $10 million. So it does not surprise me a lot that his agent was in the building saying, hey, my client deserves more money, and that the Vikings were willing to oblige. I don't think it's the last of those kinds of extensions, the sort of unnecessary pay raise, but that does right by the player who's earned it kind of thing. The Vikings have also been reported to be in talks with Josh Metellus about such a thing, who, by the way, has the same agent. So I wonder if more news is coming down the pipe there. But yeah, it's going to keep the room a little more crowded for one more year. And yeah, that's going, if your main source of information about if Dallas Turner is doing well or not is snap counts, yep, that's going to be bad news for you. But luckily, Locked On Everydayers are a little smarter than that. What I think is also interesting, I'm curious to see the structure of this, because the Vikings are up against the cap next year a little bit, but not this year. So I'm curious to see how that money is spread out. If however much of it is in like additional signing bonus money is going to spread out over the 4 void years on Van Ginkel's contract, or I guess one of them turns into a real year now. So it's 3 void years on Van Ginkel's contract. And that will spread a lot of that money out, but some of that money then has to also go into next year where the cap crunch is. So I'm curious to see just exactly how they spread that out, but it is all guaranteed except for like less than $1 million of it must be in some kind of incentive or something like that. So most of it is fully guaranteed. He will be seeing that money, but I think we don't really need to big brain it. Dude made the Pro Bowl on a $10 million contract and like deserved more money and got it. It's not a long-term commitment, right? It's just 1 additional year because he is over 30. So like that kind of makes sense. And I think if you want to critique the move, I don't think that critique has anything to do with Dallas Turner. I think the critique would be, well, he's a little older. Are we rewarding him for what he has done versus projecting what we're going to get from him in the future, which isn't always the best team building strategy. But there's a politics to this that can't be denied with how you treat your players and how that in turn affects how much people want to be Vikings, which the Vikings have. Their whole offseason has been defined by people wanting to be Vikings, whether the Vikings want them back or not. So that's clearly something that's important to them. Moving on to other questions. Glabnux Devourer of Pain and Pringles, what a name, says, is this cornerback room good enough or nah? Nah, I don't think so. Not yet. So right now, I mean, Byron Murphy, I'm happy with that piece. Isaiah Rodgers and Mekhi Blackman both go in a kind of same tier for me. I'll call them a competition tier player, where if you are anointed with a starting job, I think that's a little bit much for you. And I would be a little skeptical about what my expectations are for you. But if you are competing with somebody for that job, then I kind of get it. It's like I'm a little unsure. There's a world where you're good and I'm happy. There's a world where you're bad and I don't want to be stuck with you. I want there to be another option. And they could be the other option for each other. So if you add one more name that's semi-serious and you can then say, all right, we'll take the best, 3 guys out of that and those will be our guys, we'll be okay. It could be a world, though, where those guys do compete for the CB2 job. One of them is a Shaq Griffin. One of them is a Stephon Gilmore, right? One of them's on the field all the time. One of them's on the field some of the time. And then the Vikings just stay with the Theo Jackson world, 3 safety, kind of like they did last year. It's interesting with the fact that the draft, they got no safeties. And I don't even think they brought in safeties in undrafted free agency, right? Like there's not a single safety, not one. So that room is what it is. And Theo Jackson is going to be the 3rd safety and they just paid him more. So like maybe they're pretty excited about him. But we'll see how that goes together. But I do think that cornerback room needs one more person, which brings me to the next question, which comes from Waleed, who asks, long question, but this is genuinely making me feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone and I need help with this. Should we actually believe this Asante Samuel hype? I'm sure it stemmed solely from someone saying they saw him in a nightclub in Florida wearing a Vikings cap, with Asante himself saying he'll be a Viking after the comp pick deadline. Okay, you'll have to tell me, but I'm not going to go back and look this up, but I remember the story being that somebody asked a guy in a Vikings cap, hey, do you play for the Vikings? And he was like, yeah, my name's Asante. But whatever, details. So as far as I know, that is the only report of Asante Samuel to the Vikings. And I think it's just that it passes the smell test so easily. It just makes a lot of sense. It's an injury prone player. Kwesi loves those at a discount, right? Waiting till after the comp pick deadline aligns with the other strategies we've seen the Vikings do. And yeah, they need another corner, and Asante Samuel would fit kind of it really fits their needs. So it makes a lot of sense. So I think it's really easy to believe. But let me do a quick search. And well, as it turns out, after this question was asked, elsewhere in the world of Score North, that was a Purple Daily tip line thing. That's the deal we're all talking about. But elsewhere in Score North, Darren Wolfson went on one of their shows and said, yeah, I talked to an anonymous agent who says he doesn't think it's going to happen and the Vikings are too worried about the injury. So I don't know. I'm not a reporter. Okay. Whatever happens will happen, but it sure would make sense. I do think one other body needs to be added to that room before I feel comfortable with it. And if not, I think it's a pretty easily critiquable thing about the offseason. Skull Guy asks sort of something on that, which is, are you worried or surprised that the Vikings didn't draft a cornerback, safety, or running back in this year's draft? Surprised? No. I think I went into the drafts. There's somewhere in the pre-draft where somebody asked me what would surprise you, and I think my answer was nothing. I didn't think that there was really anything that they could do that was super outlandish or weird. Kind of all options were on the table to some degree, except for I don't know, first round tight end or something wild like that. But not drafting a certain thing when you only have 4 picks isn't that crazy. And Kwesi was actually asked about this. In his post-draft press conference, was like, hey, you didn't get anybody in the secondary. What's up with that? He basically said he didn't like any of the ones that were available at he didn't like any of the values. He just didn't like the picks. He didn't think that anybody there was worth it at their pick, or they liked somebody else better or whatever. And when you only pick 5 times, that's going to be part of it, right? And you definitely don't want to force that. That's how you get Treadwells. That's how you get or Trey Waynes was kind of another force it pick. And I think that leads overall to pretty bad drafting to force it just because it's a need. And then as for running back, definitely not surprising once they got Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones in the building and under contract for multiple years, running back really plummeted toward the bottom of the needs list. Could still be a day 3 thing, competition for Ty Chandler, but now that's just going to be the room. Skull Drew says, according to the consensus board, there were still several draftable corners available at the end of the draft, but the Vikings went with a tight end and then some undrafted free agent corners that probably won't make the team. What is the vision at cornerback? I mean, I guess we kind of talked about it, that it's those three guys, and if they add a free agent, then that would help. But yeah, they must have just not been that high on guys like Trey Amos or Savon Revel or any of those guys. And by the time they were up at 97, it was like really barren. We were pretty out of guys that anybody even saw as like third rounders. Even your Jacob Parrishes and Isaiah Porters were gone. So then it was kind of just pick a player that you're high on, pick a player that your coaches like, which sounds like what the process was for the Ty Felton thing. That sounds like somebody that Keenan McCardell signed off on, and I'm going to guess that Matt Daniels signed off on, and you went, all right, you guys go get your guy. We'll go get my guys as guys, right? And that's what that was. At the same time, if you look at everybody's roster prediction right now, it's probably going to have Dwight McGlothern on it, who also was an undrafted free agent, and there's nothing stopping an undrafted rookie from beating last year's undrafted rookie. It'll all be competition. We'll see how it plays out. I've got a whole bunch more questions, plus some of your hot takes, so I'm going to limp through it best I can. Next up on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Hey, the NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs are well underway, and if you just want to emotionally hedge on the coming doom of the Wild, we all see where that's headed, right? Throw a couple bucks down on a Vegas money line. Get your $250 in bonus bets. If you're new, you place your first $5 bet on whatever it is that you want. If you win, you get $250 in bonus bets to use on other spreads, same game parlays, live bets, like whatever it is whatever strikes your fancy. And I personally respect the emotional hedge. All right, just a little something to ease the pain when the inevitable happens. Please let this reverse jinx work. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Let's move on to some other questions. The next one comes from Gimpy, who asks, could Donovan Jackson play tackle until Darisaw is healthy again and then go back to guard? I doubt it. Donovan Jackson outside is bad. He's not. I don't think that he should be touted as somebody who has tackle guard flexibility. When I watched him play tackle when he had to fill in for Josh Simmons for a couple of games, that was his first time out there at the position, right? So Ohio State did not see him that way. He didn't see him as this versatile, like Swiss Army knife tool guy. Their tackle got hurt and they had to figure something out on the fly. That's like a much different situation. His kick slide did not get enough depth. Abdul Carter made mincemeat of him, but other tackles were able, like people could get up and around him and beat him with speed. And when everybody in college can beat you with speed, what you have to do to make up for that is like commit devastatingly to everything, and you're just going to get cooked all day long. So that is just not a good idea. Keep him at guard where he belongs, and that's where he was worth the 24th overall pick, at least in my opinion. Not as like a versatile. That's why they signed Justin School. It'll be Justin School unless somebody else beats him in a competition. Some undrafted rookie goes crazy or something like that. But right now it's slated to be Justin School. It's only a couple of games. We'll be fine. Javier Roder says, what are some things you will be looking for this spring in terms of JJ McCarthy's development? Oh, baby, I'm so glad you asked. So let's pick this up right where we left off last time, which is what I told you when he got hurt. Okay, we just click a pause button. We'll pick it up right where we left off. We won't change our expectations. We won't move them at all. We will just hit the pause button on them for a year, right? I think mentally we can change our expectations a little bit, right? He got a year on the whiteboard. He should be able to process things. But one of the big things that I was watching was about over-rotation of his hips. Essentially, if you remember watching him at Michigan, he threw like a baseball pitcher where his foot would come like swinging out and around, and he would almost have to like catch. He would almost like fall flat on his face after every throw. A lot of that is just throwing it too hard, right? And just trying to zip everything over the middle, like always a bullet pass, never lob. So that was part of it, but that was just a mechanical problem. That's the way a baseball pitcher throws is different from the way a football quarterback has to throw. And what you would rather see is you want to see his hips square to the target, right? When the ball is released, And you want to see in his follow through, you want to see his foot just kind of kiss the ground. The way I described it last year was, Princess Diaries, Anne Hathaway. You want to see that foot pop where it's just kind of kissing that toe, just kissing on the ground. You want to essentially see his feet do that. And I know that's really funny and it sounds really weird, but now you're never going to forget it. So I'm still using that as the device. But that's what you want to see. And actually I saw one clip from like the spring activities. It's not OTAs yet, but from like the voluntary workouts and stuff and like a warm up throw where it actually looked pretty good. It was a casual warm up throw. So we'll see what happens when he's in a pocket with bullets flying. Like I'm not going to put 100% stock in anything I see until the preseason where it's like a real simulation, but that's kind of the part that I'm looking for. And then you just want to hear good stuff about like the mental, and you want to see him in proper time, like going through those progressions. But again, that's not something you're going to be able to get a great look at until actual preseason tape is available to us in pads and the whole 9 yards. Botanical Jared asks, with the addition of Sam Howell, do you see the national media pushing the narrative that the Vikings still don't trust McCarthy? Boy, that would be a reach. I'm sure somebody will, right? Somebody tried to push that, like trying to sign Ryan Tannehill was like them not trusting McCarthy. Like somebody will. They're probably an Ohio State fan. You can easily disregard them. Nolan M says, for the most part, it seems like we have decent depth across the roster, but who is our backup center? If Kelly's availability becomes a problem, I prefer to have a veteran backup step in, given our QB's inexperience. This is a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. The assumption for a while was Michael Juergens when the Vikings signed Ryan Kelly. The Access Vikings Strib team was pretty adamant that, hey, they are not going to keep Bradbury around. If they feel okay about Michael Juergens, they're going to get rid of him. And then they got rid of him like later that week. And then I think it was at the owners meeting in a media appearance, Kevin O'Connell was asked about the left guard spot. And he said, we'll get some competition. Maybe, we like Juergens, we like Rouse. We're like also came up like the idea of moving guys, right? So I don't know if they see Juergens as a guard or a center or where he's going to take snaps right now, or if it's going to be a split between the two. But that would be the first place that I look. I think bringing in a free agent would be something I'm absolutely into. I thought that would have been a great time to draft someone if they had the opportunity to do that. But they didn't. It is what it is. But I would look for either Michael Juergens or like the undrafted rookie. He'll probably be third team center, but anything can happen in camp, right? If Michael Juergens gets outplayed by that undrafted guy, then maybe we start talking about it there. But that's probably the depth chart as it stands, unless they did really want to move Michael Juergens over to guard. But that conversation took place before they drafted Donovan Jackson, so maybe now they don't need to. Kevin, there's no way this is Kevin, says, you've criticized Poles for years, but this offseason has been a really good one for him. Ben Johnson, Thuney, Dalman, and Jonah Jackson, and then adding 2 more elite pass catchers in Loveland and Burden to add to DJ. So I know the various people who claim to be Kevin in this Town Hall Tuesday mailbag. There is no way that those people think that Colston Loveland and Luther Burden are elite pass catchers. Of all of the people, I know each and every person that would do that bit, and not one single one of them is high on Luther Burden or Colston Loveland. So I know you're just screwing with me. But the question is, do you still think he's a bad GM after all this now? Look, I think what Ryan Poles did, hiring Ben Johnson, he's the hot name. He's going to get a lot of praise for that. But as with all things head coach, we kind of have to wait and see, right? The hot name can be hit or miss. But what they did on the interior that is incredibly important. That had to be done. So good for you. You did what had to be done. But I'm not sure I'm still in love with that skill group, and we'll see what they can get out of Caleb and what he truly is or isn't capable of now that he has the anointed scheme lord of this year. But we had the exact same conversations with Shane Waldron last year. just replace the name, and people say, Caleb Williams and Shane Waldron, what a great pairing. We'll see how it goes. One more question. Dan Bogosian asks, is LDR likely to make the 53-man roster? He would have to be the 6th as it stands right now, right? All we can talk about is pole position. Whatever happens in camp and in preseason is going to write this story more than pole position, but that's all we know right now. And what pole position has is after, your veteran starters, you've got 3 guys at depth. You have Taki Taimani, Jalen Redmond, and Levi Drake Rodriguez. Per the depth chart last year, that was their order. So Levi Drake Rodriguez was 6th in the room, and they kept him on the roster as a stash thing, right? Don't expose him to waivers, do that. But in your second year as a 7th round pick, you're probably not going to be that precious of an asset anymore. You're not going to have that easy ticket to the roster, and you're going to have to earn it by beating out Jalen Redmond or Taki Taimani. Well, both those 2 guys actually played really good football in real life regular season games, with Levi Drake Rodriguez in sweats on the sideline a lot of the time as a healthy scratch. So tall order. You got to prove that it's worth keeping a 6th defensive lineman. They've done that in the past. That's not an impossible ask. It's like a 4th tight end. It's something you have sometimes, you don't have sometimes, I guess, when you run these kind of 3-4s. But he's going to have to really show out and do it. I thought he had a pretty good preseason last year, but he got overshadowed real hard by Taki and Jalen Redmond. Speaking of, by the way, undrafted rookies that overtake their drafted counterparts, it's a thing that can absolutely happen. Probably not the most common thing, not something I'd predict every time, but it can happen. And now we got to see if Levi Drake Rodriguez really has those goods, or if maybe they just have Taki and Redmond and they're good with that as depth. Either way, that's pretty good depth, right? It's just a little bit of an old group. So I would love to see those younger guys step up even more. You have some hot takes. I actually have a whole bunch of hot takes. So I'm going to flash through them all next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and be like, oh no, there's no money. What happened? It's pretty easy to lose track, right? In the world we live in with food delivery or just dining out or online shopping or, big entertainment expenses or whatever, suddenly you've spent way more than you can. And oh my God, what happened? Monarch Money is there to help you with that kind of problem. It's your personal CFO, but it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. You can stop managing your money and start building wealth. The point is to take the place of a whole bunch of the apps that you might use for like financial tracking or investments or to help with a joint bank account. It's like an all-in-one for those things. And that last one is really clutch. If you have a joint bank account with a partner, you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and everybody can stay on the same page without any stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. All right, it's time for some scorching, blazing hot takes here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. I'm going to be honest, not the hottest takes this time, okay? But we got a lot of them, so maybe it matches the level of energy that my voice is able to bring. We're not going to be screwing and hollering in this one. But the first one comes from Owl, who says Vikings fans refuse to criticize the team ever. The most recent example being how everyone's decided Donovan Jackson was the best choice at 24 instead of trading back when nobody was talking about him pre-draft. And this type of attitude allows the org to be complacent and has been the driving factor for the Vikings never winning a Super Bowl. Boy, where to start? There's a whole bunch of premises in here that go beyond just being like a bold opinion and are just like straight up wrong. Like saying nobody was talking about Donovan Jackson pre-draft. I can show you my receipts. I had him as one of the few guys that I was happy with refusing a trade down to take at 24. I can show you that like date stamped like messages that's me saying that. But I do also support that he was the best choice at 24. There are the only other guy that I would have maybe liked was Savon Revel. He went 76, so that's more about my own opinion, and like clearly consensus wasn't there on him. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect that. Or you have to want them to like risk it on an injury, like with Will Johnson, right? So you either have to be like really okay with medicals you don't know anything about, or you're probably just like mad in hindsight because you're used to being mad about the Vikings. I actually think that the attitude contained in this hot take is like a huge poison in the well of Vikings fandom because it seeks to punish people for having hope. And I think that just really sucks. Like you just shouldn't do that. If you personally want to say, I don't think Donovan Jackson was a good choice, I would have preferred a trade down, blah, blah, blah. We can have that conversation. It's perfectly fine, right? I don't agree with you, but we can talk. But the idea that like the fans just aren't putting enough pressure on Ziggy Wilf. Ziggy Wilf cannot freaking read Twitter. Look at that guy. That guy is not looking at Facebook comment sections for his decision making going, oh, well, they seem pretty happy. We did okay. I also think that if you want to like push the Vikings towards Super Bowl window stuff and to not be complacent, you probably didn't want them to trade back. Trading back is the kind of careful thing you do when you are, you want a higher floor but a lower ceiling, and you want to stay nice and safe. That's the Rick Spielman trade back thing. And I heard this exact same argument against them trading back in the Rick Spielman era, saying this is why they don't win the Super Bowl. They're always content with, good second rounders instead of great first rounders. They're always, this is why they have their ceiling and stuff. So Al, I don't think you actually think this. I don't think you think that trading down is the way to a Super Bowl. I think you're just mad. I think you're just always mad about the Vikings, and nothing they're ever going to do is going to help you. I just don't believe that you're there. Conversely, or I don't believe that you are sincerely a huge fan of trading down, or that you have that strong of an opinion about Donovan Jackson himself. Conversely, not mad at all. Says international games should be at most a traveling Pro Bowl games or a preseason game. You get 17 chances to win in the regular season. Home field advantage matters, and the players and staffs of team don't like to travel. I bet players and staffs would super agree with you and be like, this sucks. But it's a profit deal. Make some money in new markets, and they're never going to stop. It's only going to expand. You're not wrong, but it ain't changing. Sloth says, I've thought all along that the Vikings connection to Starks and Emenwari had more to do with mock drafters trying to find a landing spot for the first round graded safeties than actually being a fit. Sloth, I don't think that that's that hot a take. I think you just had that. He went on later in his thing to say that like that he didn't think Starks and Emenwari were necessarily first rounders or good fits for the Vikings. And I think, Sloth, you just wanted to take a victory lap here, and I respect that. Go off, King. The real ? Forno says, providing they stay healthy, the secondary is completely fine for this year. However, it will be the number one focus in next year's offseason with multiple draft picks and free agency acquisitions. Your lips to God's ears. I mean, you have to just believe in Isaiah. I actually like Isaiah Rodgers. I like what I saw on tape. I think that that's a pretty good signing, but obviously the sample size is small, so you have to like apply some level of uncertainty to it. And it's the same thing with Mekhi Blackmon, who was up and down. But yeah, I mean, if you get the positive outcomes from both of those players, if that level of uncertainty doesn't betray you and it wasn't hiding some big smoking gun that actually these guys suck, yeah, you're fine. And Brian Flores' scheme does hide the corners, right? I mean, there's a lot of cover too. There's a lot of, not that hard, a lot of just like clean zoning off and not asking those guys to do like palms where there's a role. You have to be able to, trigger downhill and tackle and do stuff. But you're not looking for the stickiest, best man corner in the whole world, right? So sure, yeah, there's a world here. Like that's not the spiciest take in the world. And I think next year it being a priority is ice cold. That feels like a pretty odds-on favorite. Definitely not Kevin. Says the Vikings have over-invested in interior offensive line this offseason. Both injuries and a scheme led to it becoming an issue last year, but overall the line was average, which is what you need. It was moving dudes at the start of the year. Defense will struggle more with a lack of investment in cornerback and safety. I think that's a perfectly valid opinion. I'm not going to complain about them over-investing in interior offensive line because it's cathartic. I mean, they've been nickel and diming, moneyballing this thing for 10 years. And it's been, I mean, we suffered, okay? We all suffered through Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia for this. All right. We deserve it. Don't tell yourself you don't deserve it. We'll get corners next year, like the other guy said. Red Homer Hanky says the Vikings' third receiver is not on the team currently, nor is its leading rusher. That's fun. That's very fun. I wonder what kind of like trade deadline move you could be talking about. So this is the leading rusher part's the hottest take, right? Like the Vikings' third receiver is not on the team currently. Okay, maybe there's some waiver claim because everybody sucks, right, or something like that. But the leading rusher not being on the team, it would be a wild plot twist. With either a waiver claim or like a trade thing happening. But we're kind of past like the majority of those trades, right? Like they did trade. It was Jordan Mason. So that would be one heck of a call, Red Homer Hanky. Am I Gross says, I don't lift the toilet seat in public restrooms. If I lift the seat, that means there's a 100% chance I'm coming into contact with the seat. If I don't lift it, then there is a less than 100% chance of touching it. That means I'm taking my chances on my aim. That means that taking my chances on my aim is more sanitary than lifting the seat. Use a piece of toilet paper or something to guard your hand if you're really that worried about it. Crumple a little up, and if you're that worried about it. But yeah, that's kind of gross. It's also gross that you're asking a Vikings podcast about that. I would rethink that choice next time. Jake says, I'm fine if this year's draft was underwhelming if Dallas Turner contributes a lot this year. Not every draft needs to be a knockout, especially in a year with so much undrafted talent because of the last COVID year. I don't think it was because of the last COVID year. I think the Vikings got a bunch of undrafted guys because they didn't have a lot of draft picks. But yeah, I mean, also the reason they didn't have a lot of draft picks was the Dallas Turner trade. So if Dallas Turner kind of comes around and becomes a better contributor, this was also written before the Andrew Van Ginkel thing, which I don't think anybody's going to be thinking about that now that he's signed for another year, which is weird. Like that affects 26, not 25. But I guess it just changes the vibe. Anon says Kwesi's best draft pick so far was the second round pick he spent on Hawkinson, the most reliable return on investment. I mean, yeah, man, that's hard to beat. He's a really good player, like cornerstone of the team. Hard to do that with a second rounder. The ghost of drafts past says Donovan Jackson will flame out like the last Ohio State guard the Vikings drafted, and which I sort of remember Luke having a crush on, Wyatt Davis. I did like Wyatt Davis a lot coming out. The reason that he flamed out had nothing to do with that. Look, this is one of those things that I heard but couldn't verify, so I never came here with it, but it's been long enough. But I'll just say that there was more off-field going on than the public knew about at the time, or at least that's what I heard. Third hand, super grain of salt. Don't take that to the bank, okay? But I would not look at Wyatt Davis as one of those draft things where you go, well, clearly, we have to learn a lesson about the draft from him, right? We shouldn't look at Wyatt Davis and say, well, that must mean Ohio State guards are bad. I mean, that's bad methodology anyways, but Wyatt Davis is not necessarily the kind of guy that you have to like create a draft principle out of. That more was going on there. All right, my voice is escaping me, so I'm going to go rest. I will see you all tomorrow. Might have Kevin on to talk about some of the small school guys. So some of the other undrafted dudes. And as always, Skull.